The original intention for the Fate of the Jedi series was that the 3 authors from the Legacy of the Force 9-book series would continue and write this one as well. However, Karen Traviss decided that she was way too busy with the Republic Commando books to agree to write 3 books in another series. And once season 2 of the 3D animated Clone Wars show came out and contradicted all the world building that she'd done for Mandalorians, she was done with Star Wars anyway. So Del Rey contacted Christie Golden to see if she would be interested in filling that 3rd author spot. By 2009, Christie Golden had written a number of Star Trek novels as well as stories within the world of Warcraft, and she had some experience with writing stories within the various realms of D&D like her fellow author Troy Denning. Fate of the Jedi: Omen by Christie Golden ultimately made it to number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list for the week of July 12th, 2009. So since I never read the Fate of the Jedi series before, I thought that I would say what I knew about Omen going into it. And that was merely that from the cover, I knew that this was going to be the book that introduced that little Sith girl that we're going to follow here, Vestara Khai. So, a brief summary. The Jedi Order are in crisis, as 2 young Jedi Knights have succumbed to madness. Luke Skywalker has been exiled from the Galactic Alliance and the Jedi Order for 10 years. And Chief of State Dala is stoking anti-Jedi sentiment as Luke and Ben Skywalker travel to the Cathal Rift to learn more about Jacen's 5-year Force pilgrimage. Even more young Jedi begin to suffer psychotic breaks. And on a remote, low-tech planet, Sith who have been stranded for millennia make their first steps toward venturing out into the larger galaxy. The second book in the Fate of the Jedi series, Omen, is pretty darn short. It's under 300 pages, and it's only 25 chapters long. So what does that mean? Well, as with the previous book, Outcast, there's not a lot of subplots to follow here, and the pace moves at a pretty good clip. Luke and Ben Skywalker continue on their journey of trying to figure out how Jacen fell to the dark side, and they decide that they're going to go to the Cathal Rift, which was last seen in Vision of the Future, the second book of the Hand of Thrawn duology by Zahn, and they want to talk to the A-Ting monks, because they know that Jacen visited them and learned from them. Specifically, learned how to flow walk through time. And as with the previous book, they not only learn a few new skills, but also end up helping the monks as well. Meanwhile, the Leia, Han, Alana plotline and the Jaina and Co plotline from the previous book have been almost merged with the Solo's return to Coruscant. Jaina and Jag dealing with relationship stuff, mainly that the press are way too interested in what they're doing. And Han and Leia and Jaina and other Jedi going to like an 4-H animal fair in hopes that Alana will find some sort of animal that she wants to take home and love, only for disaster to strike. And while all that's going on, we, yes, have more tensions arising between the Jedi Order and Dala and the Galactic Alliance government. And then way far away on the remote world of Kesh, we have this lost tribe of the Sith who've been marooned there for 5,000 years. And most of their plotline is actually 2 years before these events, because the Sith meditation sphere, who we last saw running away from Lumaya's asteroid, came to Kesh and is the impetus for them venturing outside of their remote world where they've been for thousands of years. And that is the plotline focused on Vestara Khai. So let's talk about Luke and Ben first. They decide that they want to visit the Ainti monks because they know that Jacen stopped there, and in fact they believe that was one of Jacen's first stops on his Force pilgrimage. and it's a difficult journey to get there. The Cathol Rift is very dangerous. There's these like currents, you have to follow the right ones, and you hallucinate things. And they're really only going off of the information that Talon Card left behind from years and years and years ago. And Card didn't navigate the rift himself, he was led there. And also the information that Silgal was able to surreptitiously send them. Because even though Luke is not supposed to be in contact with the Jedi Order, he is.
Editor Meg jumping in to say that I think the Cathol Rift section of Omen gives us the first of the Odyssey analogs that we'll see in the Fate of the Jedi series. In the Odyssey, after Odysseus leaves the enchantress Circe, she tells him that he's going to have to pass between Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla was a six-headed monster, and Charybdis was a whirlpool, and she basically told him, you might have to sacrifice some of your men to the six-headed monster in order not to be pulled into the whirlpool. And obviously this isn't a one-to-one analog at all, but I do think that Luke and Ben's journey through the rift, the way they have to navigate the currents, is meant to draw a comparison to Odysseus's impossible navigation as well.
Once they arrive on the Aintees homeworld, they find that the people are divided, that there was some sort of prophet. The prophet told them many things that actually happened, and then told them that those who live beyond the veil, which the monks just travel around collecting Force artifacts that they feel are connected to those from beyond the veil, and they want the Skywalkers to tell them if the prophet was correct or not. And Ben wants to learn how to flow walk, and Luke thinks that's a very bad idea, so then tension arises between father and son. It all culminates in Ben flow walks back and sees Jacen there, and doesn't see a hint that Jacen is going to fall. And it's like, I agree with you, Dad. I'm not sure this is something we should be doing, because we can't alter the past, and maybe we shouldn't even see it. And really, you probably shouldn't see the future either, even if it's a potential future. They look at all the artifacts that the monks have collected, and Luke touches something that like sends his presence out so that the Sith are able to sense him. And Luke gets a definite feeling that they need to go to the Maw, that cluster of black holes by Kessel next. They also tell the monks that they weren't able to sense those beyond the veil at all, and so maybe the prophet was right, maybe the prophet wasn't, but they need to choose their own destiny, that things aren't forescribed for the monks, and there's not this like mythical path awaiting them. They've got to figure it out like everyone else. I did feel at times that Ben didn't feel like a teenager, which I struggle with sometimes in these books, because Ben has gone through so many different experiences. He's obviously mature beyond his 16 years, but I think it was more the dialogue between him and Luke seemed less how I think a teenager would talk, and more how an adult would think a teenager would talk. And so just like his age felt off at times to me. I wasn't sure, too, about this conflict between Luke and Ben over the flow walking, because part of what I enjoyed about the previous book was how Luke and Ben are really growing this dynamic and getting along so well, and so to see them even temporarily on the outs was something I wasn't crazy about. And I felt like Luke could have maybe articulated his reasons against flow walking better, because it seemed more like, no flow walking, and Ben's like, but I learn it. And then we don't really get anyone explaining it until the end, when Ben's like, yeah, I agree, I don't think that's a thing I should be doing. But I did find it very interesting to see the monks, because in Vision of the Future, we never saw the monks. We just saw Georges Cardass, who was almost like their mouthpiece, their representative to Card and the others. And they're very strange. At first I was like, wow, these guys are real weird. Is this legit? And then I remembered that the whole idea of the Cathal Ridge and the monks originated in a campaign for the Star Wars role-playing game. So, yeah, the monks are pretty well established at this point from that Darkstrider campaign in the 90s. They, like, communicate with their 6 tongues, and they almost look like rock armadillo things. But you know what? I like getting to experience those stranger things in the Star Wars galaxy, even if sometimes you read it and you go, these guys are real strange. Over on the Coruscant front, we have 2 more young Jedi succumb to madness. The first is Valen's younger sister, Gisela Horn. And we at least get to spend a little time with Gisela to see what she's like before she falls prey to this delusion that she's hanging out with her friends. She's really worried about her brother. She's really worried about things that are going on. And when this psychotic break happens, she isn't angry like Valen is, she's terrified. And then she shows another force skill that they've never seen before, and this is part of the reason why Luke and Ben travel to the monks, is that she flow walks, something which she has not shown an ability to do before and has never been trained in. But as she's terrified and tried to escape the Jedi Temple, she's able to see exactly where the security droids are, exactly how her friends will try to engage her to stop her from doing this. And unfortunately, she is captured by the Galactic Alliance, who again refuse to turn her over to the Jedi Order. The Jedi continue to study Seth Helen, which Jaina and her team captured in the previous book, and Kenneth Hamner does not know that they have until somehow footage comes out of it, and Jaina has to say who was helping her out, which was Tekli and Segal, and she has to apologize for it, and they're punished for it. It seemed like Dala was going to be super harsh about this, but Leia was able to talk her down to a slightly more reasonable approach, and I think also that Dala's assistant, who we meet in this book, his name's Win Dorvin, helps there to somewhat temper Dala's initial response to things. And then while the Solo family is visiting that animal fair, we have another Jedi succumb to madness. This one is a Faeline woman named Natua Wan. The force ability that she has never showed before is she's able to like throw her voice, but she causes absolute mayhem at that animal fair. But the Jedi are able to capture her and take her into custody so that now hopefully they'll be able to study Natua Wan and Seth Helen and figure out what the heck is going on here. I did feel like the reason to get the Solos all at that like animal fair was somewhat a stretch. That Leia's like, we need to give Alana an animal, and like not a pet animal, but she wants to give her like a riding mount animal. Leia, you live in an apartment, where are you gonna keep this? Whatever, it just gets them in the right place at the right time when Natua Wan loses it. And Jaina and Jag are having to navigate dealing with the press, with their relationship. There's a bit where they try to like fool one of the reporters to think they're having dinner here when they're really running off to do one of their dark meld plots. And at the end, Jag proposes to Jaina, proposes marriage, and of course Jaina says yes. So I guess we'll see how that works out, because right now Jaina is very much stuck on Coruscant, and Jag is on Coruscant for the time being, but seems to be stuck in the Imperial remnant, so they're gonna have to figure that out. And then finally, we have the Sith plotline, which is set 41 years after the Battle of Yavin, so 2 years before most of the events in this book. Vestara Kai is a 14-year-old member of this lost Sith tribe that lives on Kesh, and she happens to be there when the Sith meditation sphere lands on Kesh, and she forms a connection with it because the meditation sphere is meant to teach, and she's someone that very much wants to be taught. She serves as a good introduction to this lost Sith tribe, sort of showing us how very ritualized they are, but also a little bit how stuck in their ways they are, that they've been on Kesh for 5,000 years with no way of getting off. And they seem very different than the one Sith that we briefly met in the Legacy of the Force books and who show up later in the Legacy comic series. Because they have all this tradition behind what they do and why, and they're very concerned with beauty and aesthetics and appearances. But the Sith meditation sphere showing up and telling them, hey, the Sith are all wiped out. You guys are almost all that's left. Don't you want to do something about it? So we see Vestara become an apprentice to a Sith master. And this is where I really would have loved to see her training, but we see the lead up to that. We see the meditation sphere arrive. We see Vestara with her family, Vestara's culture. She's taken on as an apprentice. And then we jump forward 2 years to the time frame of the rest of the subplots to find out that using the Sith meditation sphere, these Sith have captured vessels, they're ready to venture out into the stars, and when they sense Luke Skywalker's presence, they know who they're going to target. And I just would have loved to see her training instead of jumping ahead 2 years here. I think Vestara is an interesting character. She reminds me a lot of Empire's Hand Mara, in the sense that she's naive right now. She's very isolated. She only knows her own culture, and she's never ventured out into the greater world, and she's sure that what she's doing is right. But at the same time, she's a Sith. And so I'll be interested to see when she interacts with the rest of the galaxy how her viewpoint changes. So my first issue with Omin was a little bit of tone, and I don't know if this was because of the prominence of Vestara's plotline, who is a 14-year-old Sith girl, but it felt surprisingly young adult at times, just as though maybe because we're following Vestara, who's 14, we're following Ben, who's supposed to be 16, even if he doesn't act like it. The overall tone of the story felt younger to me than the previous book. And I wouldn't market Omin as a YA novel at all because it's obviously not meant to be one, but it did feel in parts very young to me. Even I would say Gisela and her friends, those aspects of the story, Gisela's meant to be in her at least mid-20s, but it just felt more teenage than I expected. My second issue with Omin is a continuation from Outcast, mainly just that I don't feel super sad for the young Jedi Knights who have these psychotic breaks because, again, I don't really know them as characters. At least with Gisela, we spent a little time with her before she succumbed to madness, but even then, she's hanging out with friends that we've never met before. I don't know these people. They're all talking like this is an established friendship, which is great, but like, I don't get that sense because I don't know them, and I don't even really know Gisela. She's just been a name to me, not really a character I know well. And we only get that one scene with her before she freaks out and thinks everyone's an imposter, so it's not a lot of time to develop a connection with her. And the second one, the Faeline, the Tuawan, I don't know this girl at all. And then she goes mad, and it's like, okay, she seemed like a nice young Jedi, but again, I don't know her, I don't have a connection to her, so it's hard to see and feel like, oh, this is so sad this has happened to her, she used to be so great, when it's like, I'm sure she was, but I really haven't seen proof of that. And again, the people I feel most sad for in this book was Corran and his wife Mirax, who now have 2 children frozen in carbonite, and how that has to affect them. And I think that's sort of a failure on the series' part, because I should care deeply for these young Jedi, but instead I care deeply for 2 of the young Jedi's parents, just because I know them better than I know these young guys. And then my third issue with Omin was a little bit setup issue again, and this may be because Outcast was Aaron Alston's first novel in this series. Omen is Christie Golden's first novel in this series. I wonder if I will have the same issue with the next one, Abyss, which will be Troy Denning's first novel in the series. But it just felt like nothing really important happened in Omen. Again, you don't expect it to because it's book 2 out of 9. But Vestara's plotline seemed devoted to introducing us to the lost tribe of the Sith, introducing us to Vestara, showing us what kind of person she is. And the important stuff that happens is just addressed in passing because we don't see Vestara's training. We don't see the Sith acquire these vessels to build up their fleet. We just see the meditation sphere coming to Kesh, and then it's like, and now they have a fleet and they're ready to venture out. And I just felt like we're missing something there. We're given this introduction, but that's really it. That's the only purpose that Vestara's plotline serves here. Luke and Ben travel to the Cathal Rift. They meet the Ain Tay monks, and they learn a little bit, and they know now they need to go to the mall, but it was, again, like helping the monks with a problem, learning a few skills along the way that they'll use later because Luke did use the skills he learned from the Barad-dû sages to navigate through the rift. But again, it just was like, all right, where's this journey going? You guys are moving slowly here. And again, book 2 out of 9, I understand, but it does feel like, all right, like what's the point at times? And then the Coruscant plotline, obviously things aren't going well, and the way it cliffhanger ends with Tahiri Vela opening her door and there's Galactic Alliance people and she's under arrest for the assassination of Admiral Palayan. Like, that seems like a big thing, but most of the Coruscant plotline seem to be, oh look, more Jedi falling to madness and we don't know why. And we can't see a connection between them, but they seem to be dreaming when they're awake. Jaina and Jag, it's so hard having a relationship when the press follows you and then they get engaged. And Han and Leia wanting to provide good things for Alana, and it seems like Alana's gonna get a Nexu cub in the end. So again, stuff happens, but it just felt a continuation of the setup we saw in book 1, like setting us up for the conflicts and setting us up for what's gonna happen. Because this is Golden's first novel, so Alston was doing setup, and now she's doing setup, and I guess I'll see if Denning does setup as well. But in short, Omen is a very fast read, partially because it's short. It's a pretty short Star Wars novel. We're introduced to new Sith people, and I find these guys interesting because they've been isolated for 5,000 years. They're like classic Sith stuck in the present. Vestara is an interesting character, and I would like to see where she goes, what happens to her. Luke and Ben learn some cool skills, help out some monks, and now know where they next need to go on their journey. And the situation on Coruscant continues to get worse, with Dala aware that the Jedi are hiding things from her, and the Jedi seemingly no closer to figuring out what's going wrong with these young Jedi. Like, why are they falling prey to these delusions? I do wish that we knew the young Jedi better before they fell mad, because it would, I guess, help me have a connection to them, but that hasn't happened yet. But I'm interested to see what happens in the next book as Vestara and the Sith venture out in search of Luke Skywalker, and Luke and Ben head over to the Maw to figure out, whoa, why do we sense bad stuff there? So next time I'm going to be reading the third book in the Fate of the Jedi series, Abyss by Troy Denning.